Is 7 o'clock. Whew. Turn me down. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We are in Deuteronomy chapter 20. Deuteronomy 20. I am grateful to Trenton for covering for me last week. I've missed 2 times now this quarter, and we have a lot of chapters left. So I did modify the screen again. I didn't modify it to what Trenton did last week, but from today I'm hoping to get through chapter 25, which means we're going to have to skip things, and I'm really sad. So the elders just did not give me enough time. They wanted to respect your schedules and say that we would only go an hour. Yes, I mean, that's what they did. So, that's true. I really only got 11, though. Yeah. Anyways, so we're going to start off in chapter 20. Let's begin with a prayer, if you'll bow with me. Father, we humble ourselves before you. We express our gratitude for the day that you have provided, for this opportunity to study your word. As we examine your scriptures and look at the law that you gave to the Jews, help us to notice your emphasis upon purity, your emphasis upon holiness and consistency. Help us also to take that into the law of Christ, that we are holy, we are pure, and we are consistent. This is our prayer in your Son's name. Amen. All right. So, I'm not going to go over what Trenton did. He did a fine job. I'm just going to move on because I'm out of time. So, chapter 20. We are still smack dab into the random laws. A lot of these laws were iterated the first time in Leviticus, even in Numbers. The massive difference is they are now going to have their own land, which means that some of the laws that made a lot of sense when they were wandering in the wilderness don't make as much sense anymore, and in fact could hinder the Jews from fully experiencing and utilizing the land that God is giving to them. So there's some modifications that are going on. Today in chapter 20, we're going to start off with some of the warfare changes. So wandering in the wilderness, pretty well if somebody came and fought them, fight them, kill them, drive them out. They've done the eastern side of the Jordan, which was a fight them, kill them, drive them out. They took everything, they killed everyone, they kept the livestock and the valuable stuff, but the people are gone. Now you're entering into Canaan, so number 1, what am I supposed to do with the people who are inside of Canaan? Number 2, that was weird. What am I supposed to do once we are a nation with the people outside of Canaan? So sometimes we're going to get into conflicts with people who God is not specifically telling us to annihilate. What do we do? So we're going to talk about that in chapter 20, get into a couple more interesting things into chapters 21, 22, and so on. So, chapter 20, I'm going to kind of pick and choose what we're reading as we're going through, but I do want to start us off with the beginning because it is a wonderful perspective of God. When you go out to war against your enemies and you see horses and chariots and an army larger than your own, you shall not be afraid of them. For the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And then he says, when you come and array yourself for battle, don't be afraid, even though they look much tougher than you guys. Many of these individuals used to, be farmers who are now going up against them, or they used to just be ranchers and they're going up against them. Some of them have weapons they probably took from the eastern side of the Jordan, but many of them are still going to be unarmed, sticks and pitchforks, that style. Some of them are going to be well trained in things like slings. We're probably not going to see very many archers at this point, just because bows are hard to maintain in the wilderness. Once they get into the land, we're going to see a lot more of that. They don't have horses, they don't have chariots, they have nothing. In fact, I believe it was last week that Trenton should have even commented on kings are specifically told, don't get a bunch of horses. And especially, don't get them from Egypt. So, he says, number 1, verse 2, the priest comes out and starts to talk to you. So you're arrayed for battle, you're getting ready, and the priest says, hey, we're getting ready, don't be afraid. Do not fear, do not panic, for the Lord is going before you and he will give you victory. Then they say, is there anybody here who built a new house and he hasn't yet dedicated it? Go home. Otherwise, you're going to die. Somebody else is going to take your house. Okay. Anybody here planted a vineyard, haven't yet reaped? Could take a couple of years. Oh, that's me. Go home. Anybody here who, it says down in verse 7, is betrothed to a woman and but yet has not yet married her? Go home. Otherwise, it's going to go to somebody else. The officers further say, anybody here afraid? Anybody here faint-hearted? Go home. And then, those who are left will go and fight. Now we can appoint commanders and get ready and go fight. I love this perspective of God. God says, okay, all of you went out to fight. I'm already going to let you win. So if you got any kind of other stuff going on, just go home. We'll be fine. Everything's going to be okay. If you're scared, just go home. I don't really need you guys here anyways, is the point. Therefore, you got any reason, go home. We're fine. It'll be okay. I love that. Okay. Any questions or thoughts before we get into verse 10? So, one of the new things that they're going to start doing is that they're going to come upon cities. What am I going to do with these cities? Some of them are fortified, some of them are not. Some of them are under the annihilation banner, some of them are not. If you drop down to verse 17, it gives you the annihilation list. Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, they are the ones to be annihilated. Who is the most famous Hittite? Uriah. Isn't that weird? He's in the annihilation list and yet is a mighty man of David and plays a fairly pivotal role in David's life. So, what am I supposed to do? Well, first of all, if you are fighting against a city, offer terms. That's where he begins. If they accept it, you make them fools, but the women, the little ones, the livestock, and everything else in the city you take as plunder. Now, this is only for cities very far from you, verse 15. If they are cities of the nations here, you do not offer terms. They don't go to Jericho and say, hey, you guys want to surrender? No. They're not supposed to go to Jerusalem. They're not supposed that are the outside. Did you notice there's a couple of pretty prominent nations that are not mentioned in verse 17, but are in Canaan? Like the Philistines. They're not there. You might lump them under Canaanites. Most scholars don't. So when you come up to a Philistine city, God excludes them. You could offer peace to a Philistine city. That's kind of fun, isn't it? You could think in the north. We've got places like Syria. They're going to be big issues right now. Right now, Assyria is kind of a big issue, but Babylon's more of an issue, then they're going to get annihilated. It's a whole thing. So, anyone inside the land in the list is to be annihilated. Anybody else, you can offer terms to. Take them as forced laborers. So, like Joshua does that with a group of people. Which group of people does he do that with right off the bat? He does that. Are included and some are not. Some of the reason for that is because God says you're coming in because their sin has now reached a certain point that they should be punished. So Israel is being used as the punisher. Assyria will eventually be used as a punisher. Babylon will be used as a punisher. Persia will be used as a punisher. Rome will be used as a punisher. And then Jesus will just come in and punish the rest. So that's the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. When you make a siege for a long time, starting down there in verse 19, he gives an interesting detail. What does he say they're not supposed to do? Don't take it out on the trees. That's weird, right? You guys think that's weird? What would motivate an invading army to take it out on the trees? Like, destroy all of the vineyards. All of the fruit-bearing trees. Destroy them all. What would motivate an invading army to do that? Yeah. You starve them. I mean, one of the most successful campaigns were the Huns and the Mongols. Genghis Khan, we get that term of scorched earth from them. I come in, I destroy everything, and I take everything in front of me so that anybody who tries to come behind me starves because I took it all. I killed it all. Now, he does make a difference here. If it is a tree that you can get fruit from, or food, it calls it in verse 20, don't destroy that, eat it. But if it doesn't come for food, then you can use it, build siege works, and so forth and so on. It's a pretty common practice in the Mesopotamian world when you come into an area to destroy all of the forests that are around that town. However, the vast majority of cities that they're going to be besieging in this lifetime, Joshua's lifetime, early Judges' lifetime, they're going to want to live there. One of the promises that God gave them is that you're going to be able to come in, there's going to be houses there's going to be cities established for you, there's going to be vineyards that you didn't plant, there's going to be fields that you didn't water, there's going to be herds that you did not grow. They're just ready for you. So if you come in, you attack Jericho, and you destroy every fruit-bearing tree, you have destroyed what God has already given to you. All right, any questions on chapter 20 or thoughts? I know I'm moving kind of quick, but there's some really fun stuff coming up in a few of these chapters, and this one's just not as fun. Cool. You are allowed to comment or ask questions. I know I have a lot to do. This is the Bible class, and you should have your time too. Maybe. All right, 21. I went in a field. I found a body. Uh-oh. What do I do? Now, if you go into a field and you find a body, and you know who it was, what are the possible ramifications of that event? You could be accused. You might have been the murderer. Let's assume it's a little party that comes across them, so none of the people present are assumed to be the murderer, but you know this guy had beef with those people over there. What might the family wish to do? They might want to just go take vengeance on their own, right? Now, we talked about the cities of refuge last week. This is a slightly different one, because this one we have no idea what occurred. Someone is found slain, lying in the open country. It is not known who killed him. There's no evidences. There's no witnesses. There's no real clear argument going on here. A manslaughter argument could get you to the cities of refuge. A conflict that was known might get you to a city of refuge. This is the entire, we have nothing. We got no idea. There's a dude dead in the field. I don't know. So how do we handle it? First, the elders of the city that is near it have to be called for. So the elders of those who found the body come out with their judges. They measure the distance to the surrounding cities, and the closest city is the one that will bear the guilt. The closest city then, those elders have to come and take a heifer that has never been worked and never pulled a yoke. They bring it out of the city. You bring it down to a valley that has running water that is there, an area that's not plowed, an area that is not sown, and break the heifer's neck in that valley. You guys think that's weird? What does it say to do with the blood? There is none. That's weird, isn't it? Very few times, in fact, I don't even remember another time where we are told you don't drain the blood. It's just kill the animal. It does not happen very often. In fact, there's a lot of regulations against it. Even in the New Testament, the apostles have to write and write an open letter to the Gentiles saying, stay away from blood. Like, it's a big deal. Don't eat things that are strangled is in the law, as well as even reiterated in that letter in the New Testament. But this time we come in and we break the neck in the valley. Then the priests, the sons of Levi, come forward, for the Lord's chosen them, and by their word every dispute and every assault shall be settled. The elders of the city that is nearest to the slain man wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the valley. And they testify, our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it shed. Accept atonement, O Lord, for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed. Do not set the guilt of innocent blood in the midst of your people Israel, so that their blood guilt be atoned for. So you shall purge the guilt of innocent blood from your midst when you do what is right in the sight of the Lord. Now, this is going to happen. You're going to be walking and you're going to find a dead dude. Like, it's going to happen. Whether it happens because of banditry, it happens because of jealousy, it happens because this is, you tripped and you fell and you hit your head. I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to come up. How do we deal with it? We deal with it this way. We do not know what occurred, so no one bears the guilt. And in order to prove that, we have the ritual of the heifer washing my hands above it and saying, go on. Any questions, any thoughts on that? Yeah. No. And it, yeah. And it has to be settled. Not only are we going to do an investigation, but it has to have a conclusion. And if that conclusion is we don't know, there still is an end to this, which I think is also pretty new. The idea that we finished this, we put it aside. Also, the ESV never says it's one of your brethren. It's just you found a body. So I found a foreigner. I found one of those we're supposed to annihilate. I still have to deal with this. So I like the comments. This is sanctity of life. We have to deal with what's going on. Yes? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's supposed to have not been. I don't know how long it remains unworked. I kind of get the impression that it is not really workable land. Like, it's a valley with a river. Okay, it can be workable, but by and large, over there you have a lot of wadis, which there's water, sometimes there's water, not all the time. And that may be something we're looking at here, or it may be one of those areas where they constantly have water, so it's near Jordan or something of that kind. Yeah? Cool. Let's get to the next section. What do I do if we go to war and I find a woman and she's super cute? And I'm like, I'll make her mine. What do I do? Am I allowed to do this? How do I do it? So, God sets down some regulations. This is not the only time that he sets down regulations, but they're about to literally go to war with a whole bunch of people. So he's going to reiterate. When you go to war, you see a captive among the captives, a beautiful woman. You desire to take her to be your wife. You bring her home. She shaves her head. She cuts her nails. She takes off the clothes in which she was captured and remains in your home for a month to mourn the loss of her family, her father and her mother. After that, you can go in, be her husband. She shall be your wife. If you no longer delight in her, let her go wherever she wants. You shall not sell her for money, nor shall you treat her as a slave, since you have already humiliated her. Interesting. Thoughts? Ben looked like he had thoughts, so that's why I said it already, because he was like, ready. Because by necessity, she is not Jewish. When you go to war with your own brethren, one, you're already having a problem. And there is no real regulation for I went and stole a brethren, a daughter of someone else. It's not really a regulation for that. The closest we're going to get is over in Where is it? It might even be in chapter 25. When it comes in with, if a man is found stealing one of his brethren, that is more where it comes down to. When a Jew goes and takes a Jew, that's not allowed. But you can do it with a foreigner. So that's kind of the perspective we're getting from here. Why would God allow her to go wherever she wants? Especially during this time, and it's also going to still be pretty prevalent when Rome is in charge. If you go to battle and don't die in the battle, but your side lost, they consider you as dead. The gods have killed you, you just happen to still be here. The Jews continue that same idea. You lost, you have now been separated from life, even though physically you're still alive. So I can take that one and treat it like a possession. I can take them and make them into a slave because you're a dead body. You are not alive any longer. But if I take a dead body and make it my wife, I can't then turn back around and say, oops, I'm going to treat you like you should have been dead, like a already dead individual. Also, this is another time when God is protecting women. We don't see it often, and especially from a 21st century perspective, we rarely see it as a protection to a woman. But your city loses in the battle. You are taken, you are given to a man, and allowed to mourn. Openly mourn. All of your paganism is taken from you. Everything is gone, but you are given a full month to mourn. Then he marries you and decides at some point, I'm done with you. He's not allowed to mistreat you. He's not allowed to hurt you or harm you. In fact, some of the later writings of the Jews will even go into he has to provide funds for transportation. He has to provide goods in order to get you where you wish to go. So it's not just the open door. They expound upon this to say how you treat her has to be different because you did this to her. Yes. Mm-hmm. She doesn't get a choice here. I mean, it's ancient world practice. I mean, pretty well, you've taken her into your home. You're married by most of the ancient world standard at that point. God broadens it to say she has a month unmarried. But most of the ancient world would have already said you took her into your possessions, like your home, your tents. Now it's over. Marriage has occurred, even though we would like a ceremony. That's our 21st century perspective. They didn't always need it. And so what is it? Isaac sees Rebecca. She gets off the camel, and he takes her in. They're married. And, yeah. No problem. You're going to have more questions because there's some fun chapters coming up in here. You're going to have more questions. So keep them coming. Okay. Next section here starts off in verse 15. What do I do if I got two wives and I like one of them and I don't like the other one? But unfortunately for me, the one that I don't like is the one that had the oldest kid. I don't really want to make him all nice and happy, and I really want my loved wife's kids to be the one to get all of the inheritance and the possessions. Can I do that? God says no. You married them both. The unloved has the firstborn. You have to honor the firstborn. Now, has this occurred in other times? Like, let's say, patriarchs? There's a couple of them, right? Abraham has a firstborn that he then has to ship away. And yet, does he not give gifts and gifts and gifts and gifts? He's pre-law of Moses, so he's not upheld by this, but he still understands there's a wrong here. Jacob has a similar issue. Oldest is not from the woman he likes, it's from the woman he doesn't like. In fact, isn't it, he even takes 2 more quasi-wives before finally the woman that he likes has a kid? There's a lot of earlier borns in front of his favorite kid. And what happened when Jacob turned around and made the child of the woman he loved his favorite? It was not good. So God is bringing this into the law, and they're going to have a lot of complications, a lot of messy situations. So you're coming in and you're going to war. You conquer a city, you take the women, you decide, I like one of them. And then, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 years later, you're like, you know what? I got some kids with her, but she's a Canaanite. She's not really of my people. I'm going to take a Jewish wife and have Jewish kids. I already have older ones. Can I ignore them? The answer is no. So then you fast forward to the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, and sometimes they do throw out their firstborns. Because God says you have to be pure. We intermarried. They're not being raised pure. Their mothers leave as well as the children. This is messy, isn't it? This is one of the reasons why the book of Hebrews spends so much time saying our law is so much superior. Because this is one specific law, and how many holes did I poke through it where, honestly, from a human perspective, we're just going to break it. There's really no good option here. We're just going to sin. We cannot keep it because of the mess that we get ourselves in. All right, any thoughts on that before I get to the next one? Super fun one. Cool. My kid won't listen to me. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, he will not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him, bring him out to the elders, and say, This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of the city will stone him to death with stones, so you will purge the evil from your midst. And all Israel shall hear and fear. What are they talking about? What does it mean, I have a stubborn and rebellious son? How is being stubborn and rebellious having evil in our midst? And why does God say, go stone this boy or man? Thoughts? Yes. Yeah. Almost assuredly, it is idol worship. This phrase, the idea of stubborn and rebellious, holds its roots in some of the other words that we're going to get. So like in the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, we see the phrase sons of Belial. Some of yours will just translate it as rebellious, even though more literally is a sons of Belial phrase. Because that is rebelliousness. I have gone towards idolatry. Could it be broader? Probably. What are the consequences to the parents if they have taken their son and had him stoned? It doesn't say in the verse, but what do you think? Do you think that they would gain honor and glory in their town? Do you think that they would be considered wise and reputable citizens? I don't. Can you imagine, those of you with children, you take one of your kids, you drag them to the front of town and say to those who decide justice, I can't keep this person in line. I can't do it. Kill them. No, you're not getting glory out of this. So it is a moment of shame. How old does the kid have to be? ESV says son. Let's see, what other words do we get in here? Our son is stubborn and rebellious. They drag him. All the men of the city come and stone him. How old? Old enough to be a glutton and a drunkard, 9-year-old. Okay. Which requires a pattern. Okay. That's a wonderful comment. I love that. Old enough to be evil in the midst of the congregation. So how old would you say? Knowing what you know of the ancient world, their standards, when did someone become a man? When do they have male responsibilities, adult responsibilities? When would they become? When would society become worried that this is evil in our midst? We need to purge it. I would say at least teenager. 8 to 10, I could probably beat them. Right? Yeah. 8 to 10-year-old is probably still following mom. Has not yet been given a lot of responsibilities of the men. Not allowed to go to war. Not allowed to marry your own property. There's not a lot of moments for that. Most fathers would look at that and say, I got an 8 or 9-year-old that's pretty rebellious. What they really need is some hard work and being beaten by men for a while. That's a good ancient world. Not so ancient. We still think that way. You want to be that way? Fine, go to work. We still think that way. But as you're creeping towards man of war age, you are starting to creep towards, once you hit 20, you have some say in arguments. You can own property. You could be entrusted to go into battle with your brethren, bringing with you uncleanness, unholiness. What would that do to the army then? Puts it at risk. Yes, in the back. Yep. It's a wonderful question. In this period of time, when was a child, especially a son, allowed to be rebellious against their father? Never. It is really not until we hit the Industrial Revolution that begins to broaden. I mean, some cultures are a little bit different, but by and large, broad strokes of our human history, the idea of authority runs downhill. So to use the Romans really painted a wonderful picture. The gods give authority to the emperor gives authority to the Senate gives authority to local governors give authority down to their officers give authority down to the father, from the father goes to the wife, mother, goes to older servants, then to children, then to slaves. So authority runs downhill. When is a son allowed to make a decision that his father does not approve of? When dad is dead. So to the question, you could be dragging a 45-year-old before the city gates. Which kind of goes along with what we talked about several chapters ago. If you learn that your family member is practicing idolatry, what is your first responsibility? Kill them. We've made a big deal about how that specific one says, just kill them. You know it, kill them. It says if you hear of a neighbor or a city, there's an investigation, you bring judges in. It does not say that for family member. So we could be looking at this child or young man is going in the wrong direction. I don't have it in me to kill them. So I bring them to the elders. The elders are now the witnesses, and they, as well as all of the men of the city, stone them. It's a hard one. That's why I wanted to spend a little time on it. Yes? feel like I have a memory of one time in Scripture, but I don't really remember. But I don't think it was. I mean, that's... Yep. On the other hand, it would have lowered the population, but they would have been righteous, and Moab wouldn't have been brought in, Philistia wouldn't have been brought in, they wouldn't have had the downturn times, which is hard. That is the purity problem that I think God is addressing here in this section. Okay, we got to move on. Thank you for spending some time on it. 22 to 23, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because the New Testament spends quite a bit of talking about, I threw a rope over a tree branch and I hung them up there and they hanged. That really wasn't